Welcome on into the Wolverine.com podcast. Clayton Safey here with Chris Ballas and Anthony Broom. 2 days before Michigan's 2022 spring game, the first one in 3 years. So we'll be there at the Big House on Saturday. We're going to talk about that as spring ball wraps up. We will also discuss basketball, some offseason storylines, transfer portal type of stuff at the end as well. That's kind of, man, talking about these coaches in the basketball world, it's like the season ends and the work begins for these guys putting together rosters when you don't know what you have and all the numbers and all that. So it's super hard, but we'll get to some of that and obviously a ton of moving pieces. But let's start with spring football coming to a close here. Excited for Saturday. Should be a real game. 12-minute quarters, 12-minute halftime. 2 minutes in between the quarters, so it's going to move fast, action-packed. Quarterbacks will be live other than Cade McNamara, who's going to play on both teams, which I guess makes it fair, right? And one team
that would have been good to know 2 days ago.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, one team doesn't just get him. There is some buzz, though, I'm hearing surrounding one team. I can't say which team, but the guys are feeling good. We talked to a couple guys today that were, already kind of talking a little bit of trash, saying that the other team's going to, have to eat hot dogs on Saturday night and all that. But let's start with you, CB. What are you most excited to watch for on Saturday? Position group, a player, just the festivities overall. What are you most excited for?
A football game with a crowd. I go back to when I was in school at Michigan, and my dad would come down, and we would sit there, and it'd be sunny and 48 degrees, and you're just soaking it in, and it was an actual spirited football game. And I remember one year it ended with a missed field goal that hit the crossbar, and they celebrated like they just won the Big Ten. And they ran over and they were rubbing it in their friends' faces, and it was a blast. And that's what I like about it. Back then, guys, you could go on the field and mingle with the players and just talk to whoever you wanted to. It's a little bit different now. Now you have to pay $100 for an autograph, so bring your Benjamins. And because that's what it's going to take. But regardless, it's going to be a great atmosphere, and I'm excited to see it. Excited to see what the defensive line does against the run and how they hold up against that offensive line, which I think is going to be outstanding. And the receivers, I want to see what those receivers do. And I think Cade McNamara, from everything we've heard, has been extremely sharp this spring. So just all of it, guys. Just going to be nice to be out there and watch some football.
Yeah,
some
real
Michigan football.
Michigan football. And yeah, I remember those days as well, going to the spring game. I got a picture with the cheerleaders down there. Maybe I'll put it in this video afterwards. But got that. I got like an autograph with, some players, and you got the pictures and stuff like that back in kind of the Chad Henne, Mike Hart, his first time around in Ann Arbor, those types of days. And it was fun. And I'm all for NIL and all that. And Michigan's got to, do what they can. But $100 even for kids, that's tough. You feel like, you want to get them to be the types of fans that some of us were, and it starts at that young age. But AB, what are you most fired up about?
Just seeing guys compete. I mean, the Cade McNamara's of the world, the Blake Corums of the world. Like, we know what those guys can do, but I want to see, how a Tavier Dunlap looks, how we've heard Kellel Mullings has played on both sides of the ball, how those types of guys look. Your Rayshon Bennies, your George Rooks of the world, the young wide receivers. So I want to see how those guys compete with, for a lot of them, especially the early enrollees, it'll be the biggest crowd they've ever played in front of, even if it is just an April spring game. So seeing those guys compete, I mean, popular vote aside or not, us doing that spring game draft the other day kind of set in that, like, this is a really talented football team. And there are a lot of guys that can make an impact in a lot of different areas that might even, we talk about the two deep, but there are probably 2, 3, 4 guys deep in a lot of different spots. So excited to see those types of guys compete. Your Darius Clemens of the world, your Derek Morse, your Olu Oluwatimi, a new team. We think we know what he is, but competing with a new team. So just excited to see the new faces. Excited to see. Really, I mean, it's been math. Math is hard. 4 months since the end of the football season now. So to see the physical leaps that some guys have made, whether it be from freshman to sophomore or just, having another year of conditioning, that's always pretty exciting too. So, first and foremost, like, what do you want to see? You want to see good health. You want competition. You want guys getting after it, but you want guys to stay healthy too. So that's where I would think that the bulk of the focus for me will be on Saturday. Just seeing who flashes, because that's really all it is. I mean, we've heard about the spring game superstars before, the spring superstars before. The one that always sticks out in my mind is Freddie Canteen. He was going to be the next best thing to sliced bread. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Excited to see the guys get out there. Excited to see some of these young guys for the first time, because we don't get to see behind the curtain, so to speak, during spring football. So that's going to be what I'm most interested in seeing on Saturday.
Yeah, the early enrollees, to me, other than them, it's the sophomores, that sophomore class that was so highly touted. You have your guys like J.J. McCarthy, unfortunately won't play, obviously, with the shoulder soreness. But guys like Donovan Edwards, who, it's amazing, like, they're still in their freshman years, but it's amazing what going through a season can do. Being in potentially your second spring, if you were an early enrollee last year, what doing stuff for the second time can do. And they, at times will look like completely different players, even though we just saw those guys on December 31st in Miami at that game. And, a lot of them weren't playing as much. When they had the roles, they could do one or two things. But it's amazing the confidence that you can get with an off season, with, off season to be in the weight room, not even a full cycle, but, guys like Andrell Anthony, you mentioned a couple of those guys, Rayshon Benny, George Rooks at the defensive line spot. It's too bad Rod Moore is out in the spring, because I'm excited to see him in the fall. But obviously good that he's going to get healthy. So guys like that, I'm excited about. I want to see the defense as well. It's going to be tough to tell exactly how strong a defensive line is, because you're splitting the guys in half. But if a guy can make a play, or if if they can get off of a block, against one of the top offensive linemen, you're going to have to really, really watch what you're watching, and that's going to be interesting. But I wanted to throw it around for this as well. Like, Chris, what is the number one thing maybe you've taken away from the spring so far, in terms of things that kind of we've heard, or that we expect to see on Saturday, things that have changed from last season? What's your kind of overarching possible takeaway?
Yeah, number one, and it's kind of cliche, but it's that championship vibe that I wrote about in my column, that these guys expect to win now. And you've got a lot of guys that understand, like Mike Morris. It's not an option for me to fail. I've got to come in here and I've got to replace these guys and do my job. And he's actually reaching those goals that he set for himself. And to hear that is pretty exciting. So the leadership, I'm very interested to see who emerges, guys, on the defensive side of the ball, because you don't have that big personality. Mozzie Smith is not that guy. He's a leader by example, and we've heard unbelievable things about him. John Jansen even was talking about him on his recent In the Trenches podcast as a guy. Everybody asks him, have you seen Mozzie? Have you seen Mozzie? Because of how big he is and how strong he is and how well he's playing. So, but I just think there's a lot of talent. Like you said, Anthony, when you go up and down the list and you're drafting these guys, 2 years ago, we're like, man, is this thing trending in the right direction? Are they recruiting well enough? And now you look at some of the guys on the team, and Jim Harbaugh doesn't say it lightly when he says, man, we've got a lot of talent on this team. I forget the exact words he used, but scary, I think scary.
Scary good.
It's going to be scary good, yes.
Yeah.
And he doesn't throw that out there unless he really believes in his guys. And you can see that there are a lot of football players out there. So there are going to be question marks. There were huge question marks on the defensive line last year, and those guys held up despite not having the kind of depth that they thought they'd have. Chris Hinton and Mozzie Smith stayed healthy, but they didn't have anybody behind them. Chris Jenkins emerged a little bit, but now you're looking and you're saying, okay, if you're looking for a weakness on this team, there isn't really one that stands out, in my opinion, with the exception maybe. I think the ends will be fine against the run. Are they going to have a pass rush? And that's the big question mark. But we'll find out, I guess, in the fall. And there are other ways to get to the quarterback. I was watching the Penn State game in 60 the other day on the BTN, and Junior Colson looked like he was shot out of a cannon on one of those blitzes, guys. So they've got athletes if they decide to move these guys around like they did last year with Mike McDonald, which they will with Jesse Minter. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say about the pass rush is that, yes, on paper, you're losing 2 first-rounders, first-round talents. We'll see what happens with Ojabo, but 25 sacks off of your defense. I think coming out of the spring, I feel more confident about their ability to replace that as a defense, as opposed to just, okay, Mike Morris, Taylor Upshaw, go get him. We need you guys to be the next Hutchinson and Ojabo. We talked to Mike Elston the other day, and he spoke about how there's going to be more of an emphasis on them, rushing the passer from from the interior, and they expect Mosley to be a part of that. And Rayshon Benny and George Rooks and Chris Jenkins and that group of guys they have in the middle there. We've talked before about how it seems the safeties have been working more on blitzing and getting to the quarterback, and the defensive backs are working on technique and holding up in coverage. So, yeah, I think just seeing those, you're not going to see, people. It's going to be vanilla on both sides of the ball. That's the type of playbook they'll run. That's the type of defensive calls they'll put out there. You're looking for technique stuff. You're looking for, those battles along the sideline between wide receivers and cornerbacks. Is the cornerback turning his head and locating the football? Are the wide receivers, running technical or precise routes? It's those little type of things. And I think, the one thing about, the biggest storyline last year was that Harbaugh filled out his staff with young guys that brought energy. And I think that flavor is still there. But when you talk about someone like Elston and Clinkscale and, some of these other guys that they have on the staff, I really do think that flavor this year is more on the technique and the details and the finer parts of their game, because based on what we saw last year, there's a pretty good foundation for what they can be. Because of what you lose, you have to be a little bit better in every single area. And the way that happens is by hammering away at your fundamentals. So excited to see those guys that take that step. Excited to see what the defense, some of those defensive guys stepping into bigger roles looks like, namely a Junior Colson, who is the guy at linebacker now. It's going to be really exciting to see what they throw out there, even if it is a 10-7 bar fight spring game. I'm still going to be. I'll be locked into every snap of that.
Yeah. You mentioned, you bring up a great point. Chris Jenkins talked about it today, how last year when they were on pass downs, it wasn't even really in their mindset to like, oh, I'm the guy that's got to get after the quarterback. It was more, you got to be in the right spot. You got to be gap sound, all that. You knew you had guys outside of you that were going to get there. But he said with Mike Elston and what he's brought to the table, now that mentality's changed because they know they're going to have to manufacture it in other ways. And there are other ways to do it. And now that they feel a little more comfortable in those roles, they feel like they can get there. Chris Jenkins is a guy has had a big body transformation over the last year. So he's going to be, another guy who feels a little bit better about himself in his role this year coming up. And I think you guys both in different ways touched on kind of what I've, continued to hear when we talk to these guys is the chip on the shoulder there, because you weren't 2-4 last year. And that was kind of a blessing in a way in terms of how that team was forged. But they still feel like they have a lot to prove. Joel Hornigford said, I'm not standing here as a national champion. So, we still have a lot to do. And that's one of the reasons why he came back for a sixth year, which feels like 10 years, position switch and all that. And then I forget who, I think it was Joel Hornigford who talked about Ben Herbert, how in the weight room they walked in the first day in January. They usually all, I think, it must be the shoes they come in with. They line them up against the wall one by one. He said, we're not doing that this year. Everyone flip your right shoe to the side, flip your left shoe to the side. And they measured out how much distance, like how much space that saved against the wall. And he said, one little thing like that, and look at how much room we saved, for whatever. And it was an example and a visual example of how these details that they're going to be working on and that they're going to try to fine tune can be the difference between Big Ten champions and national champions. So that seems to be like that chip is still there, but now they're kind of fine tuning. Now guys know what they're supposed to do. There's a lot of returning guys on offense, especially. So I like that vibe coming out of the spring here too. And all of these guys have said the standard is there, Chris, the words you use. That standard's set by some of the guys that are already here. Some have left, but everyone in the building just about has seen what it takes to win a championship.
Yeah, and that's huge, because how many times did I say it, guys, that success breeds success, and these guys hadn't seen any champions in the room since 2004. And as Doug Skeen, my podcast partner who won 5 Big Ten championship rings, said, they would talk before the season, guys, about where they were going for the Rose Bowl in Pasadena and what they were going to do. And those guys before them were the ones that really stepped up and said, okay, these are the expectations and you're going to live up to them, period, end of story. And they didn't know any other way. Well, for how many years did these guys know second, third place, fourth place, losing to Michigan State?
17 years.
Yeah, exactly. Still losing to some games to Michigan State, which needs to change, and I think will. I think last year was kind of a, call it a fluke, but it was one of those games where if you look at the stats and the way it played out, you should have won that game. So, but these guys now understand that this is what it takes. They've gone through it. They understand. They know how to get there. And they did it without the huge armed quarterback, and without the one guy. They did it completely as a team. And the cliche of the team, but that's exactly how you win, fellas. And there were some elite talents on that team, no question about it. But Hassan Haskins, I would say he's a great college running back. Is he an elite game-breaking pro? No. Cade McNamara is not going to be an elite pro quarterback. He didn't have any receivers out there that were elite pros. Tight ends, same thing, right down the list. So they got the formula back, and now it's about keeping it and understanding and they got rid of some of the headaches. Some of those elite talents were just pains in the ass, fellas, that were all about them and would rather sit than practice for their team, to protect their draft stock, or, the first sign of adversity, they're bailing and can't wait to get out of there and come back and haunt Michigan or whatever. Well, that's a bunch of crap. That's not how you win. And I think they put that behind them, really got the culture back to where it needed to be. Now it needs to stay there.
For sure. Yeah. And to build off that, like, Ronnie Bell is one of the guys that I feel like is the most like bought in type of guy. He's really smart. You can tell he can read other people. And what he was saying, he could tell in his first few years at Michigan what Jim Harbaugh was trying to build, and it wasn't there. And he realized last year from the sidelines, taking a step back, and it was like, wow, this is what he wanted the whole time. And it all came together. And now those voices, those negative voices maybe that don't want to practice or whatever, they're drowned out by the rest of the guys that are all on board and with the vision. So I think that's huge.
All in for Michigan, Clay.
Right. Remember that motto, going back to Rich Rod. It was finally what Rich Rod envisioned. This is it.
Yeah.
Other than the non-spread offense type of stuff. But
but that's important, guys.
Yeah.
It really is. It's stupid as it sounds, and what's his name up there, PJ Fleck, and his row the boat crap. It sounds hokey, but he's exactly right, man. You got to get rolling in the same direction, and that's the biggest key to any team. First, talent obviously, helps and matters. But having that culture, and they fixed that, Anthony. And to me, it was really interesting listening to Ronnie Bell say, during the COVID year, we had guys we couldn't stand each other. And I'm like, well, no wonder you were 2-4. If you can't stand being around each other, then you got no chance.
Yeah, it's a big part of it, and it's why when you go back, and I think earlier this year when we were revisiting some of those recruiting classes from the Harbaugh era, and like a 2017 class, a 2016 class, where you see, you're ranked inside the top 5, top 6, or whatever, and you've got all these blue chip guys at the top, but a good half to 2/3 of the blue chip guys just didn't pan out or wound up elsewhere because, you stop short of calling them derelicts. That would be a little bit mean, but they weren't culture fits, and they were, I think that in the early stages of Jim Harbaugh building this program, he was a bit of a carnival barker, right? And they would go around the country in these satellite camps, and they'd take guys that you thought were weird takes, and they'd take other guys to get an in a certain state or things like that. And they'd, go in on all these elite, these elite blue chip recruitments, which, don't get me wrong, you still need that. And Michigan will continue to recruit at a high level, but it seems like in the last couple of years, the focus has been back to, let's get guys that are good teammates. They love the sport and are coachable. I don't think they had a ton of that early on. And, talent's important, and bringing in blue chip talent is important. And, the Alabamas and the Georgias of the world, they are unicorns because they're able to find a way to do both and load up at so many different positions. But, whatever they did last year was the perfect, chemical mixture to get this thing headed where it needed to go. And it didn't seem like there were any, I said this in the preseason, like the team didn't have a ton of personality, but they all had the same personality and they were all kind of on the same page. And, when you have just a bunch of guys that just want to work hard, stay out of the limelight, and let their play do the talking on the field, forget the guarantees that, we guarantee we'll beat Ohio State, we guarantee we'll beat Michigan State. Forget all that crap. Just go out, go do the work. We love the headlines and stuff. It makes our jobs easier. But you know what else makes our job a lot easier is what the team does its job on the field. Then we write nice things, and then people read more of the things that we put out. So I like, just from a culture perspective, where things are at right now. And I think a lot of that has to do with, and we've hammered this point home several times, in having, it's not just that Jim Harbaugh has, the Michigan men on his staff. I think people roll their eyes on that. Yeah, that gets you in the door, but every guy that's on this staff right now is qualified to be here and is damn good at their job too. And the fact that what they have there with the players, the coaches, despite all of the stuff we went through in the month of January and February with the uncertainty, once everyone sets foot inside the football building, they are all on the same page. And that's why if it continues to be that way, which until something else happens, we have to assume it will continue to be that way. You have to like this program's chances of staying in the conversation for the foreseeable future.
Some profound stuff right there.
Nice.
Yeah. Very well said. Do you guys want to flip over to the basketball side of things?
Let's finish up with some hoops.
Off season's here. It was only a week ago that they were playing in San Antonio. Obviously a tough loss that's going to sting for a while. Feels similar to me than, to last year with UCLA. Obviously a Final Four wasn't on the line, but, could have gotten there potentially. Now here we are with decisions, basically waiting on that. Moussa Diabate, Hunter Dickinson, Caleb Houston. Obviously, each guy has their own scenario. Each guy, different percentages I would put on it to who's going to return, who's not. Right now, you're full on the scholarships, but there's probably going to be a transfer out or two. There's probably going to be one of those two guys, or one or two of those three guys leaving, and all that. So it's kind of the waters are going crazy here, and the transfer portal. Michigan looking at it very heavily, reaching out to guys. At the same time, like you don't even have necessarily a spot that you can, guarantee right now at this point. So it's kind of all preliminary. But what are you guys thinking a week into the offseason here?
Yeah, first of all, he's got to figure out who's leaving and so he can, they're looking at the portal right now, but they need answers from these guys. And Hunter Dickinson, we've heard back and forth things for the last month, and there's rumblings that he's got an apartment in Ann Arbor now, or getting an apartment. And there, a month ago, somebody close to the program told us they wouldn't be stunned at all if he came back on a huge NIL deal. But others have told him, you're 21 years old, you got to strike while the iron is moderately hot, at least warm, so it's never going to be steaming hot for him in the pros, guys. He is who he is. But and speaking to some NBA types who work with NBA players, they think there's a role for Hunter Dickinson in the NBA. So because he's a basketball player, don't know who he's going to guard, but you know what? He could be that, guy that the 9th, 10th guy, especially if he continues to develop that jump shot. So, but then Moussa Diabate, they're supposed to sit down with him this week and decide what he's going to do. I know some of his people are interested in having him move on and getting full-time development at the pro level, probably the G League, obviously. He's got a lot of work to do, guys. He's a project, flat out. I'm not hesitant to say that at all. His hands, his knowledge of the game doesn't mean he's not going to be a good basketball player, but has some work to do. And then you move on to the guys, the Alabama kid, the big kid at Alabama, and the kid at the wing at South Carolina, Devin Carter, is that his name? I forget. But anyway, yeah, I don't think it's Carter, but regardless, he's one of the South Carolina kids who and Jordan Howard played with his dad in the pros. So we understand that there's been contact there. So there's a two guard at a smaller school who has not entered the portal yet, so we will not talk about him. But they feel, he's reached out, and I think that he really wants to be here. So, but you can't do any of that, guys, until you find out who's going to be here. And there will be somebody leaving. I'm pretty sure of that. There's been rumblings of a kid looking at DePaul, moving on to DePaul, and actually has put some stuff on his Instagram, like a little puzzle. So you guys can figure that one out for yourselves, the users. But until he leaves, we don't sit there and say this guy's leaving. So regardless, it's a puzzle, guys. It's like you said at the start, Clay. It's, Juwan Howard's got his work cut out for him, just like John Beilein did when he was trying to put a team together after that run where, oh my God, Jordan Poole's leaving and Iggy's leaving, Brazdakis, and now you're starting from scratch. He was on a plane for 30 days. That's essentially what helped drive him back to the NBA.
Yeah, it's tough right now, especially not knowing who's going to be here or not. It's Taylor Funk was the guy from St. Joe's. I thought they did have some interest in. He's going to Utah State. That just came up down as we started recording here. So he's a guy that's off the board. Yeah, everyone's in kind of a holding pattern, and knowing that, Clayton, I saw you put on the board with what is the deadline for NBA type decisions?
So, they would have to be out. Like if they declare, I believe it's April 16th, and then they could come back before June 1. So this is like, and remember Hunter? I mean, we were into the summer talking about this stuff last year. So we're just starting.
Yeah, sometimes it drags out too. So you have to sort of project here, and that's where, and there are some. We know that Devontae Jones won't be back. He officially declared. We'll see what a guy like Brandon Johns, if he has a 5th year, do they ask him back? We'll see. Caleb Houston and Musa again. Chris, to your point on Musa, I'll take it a step further. Like he is an athlete right now. He is not a fully formed basketball player, and if I'm a big guy, I'm probably going to roll the dice on Juwan Howard developing me. But at the same time, a full-time skill development, especially, he's an international student as well. So I understand that the NIL stuff is a little more complicated for him. So it's not just as simple as, let's put an NIL package together for him. There's some red tape there with that too. So it's going to be difficult until you get some answers here. I think they probably do, if you lose someone from the backcourt or the wing, you probably need to go get it too. You can make the argument that point guard is still a need, even though I think with how Frankie Collins played in the NCAA tournament, you can kind of, I don't know if you could just hand him the job. I think some more competition would be good for him, but you have Doug McDaniel coming in too. At least you have 2 deep there. They're a little bit thin at these other spots if certain guys decide it's time to move on. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all shakes out, but it's just it's impossible to even put thoughts to, we get questions all the time. What do you think this team looks like next year? We don't even know who will be on the roster next year. So it's impossible to project right now.
Yeah, that's the thing about this thing. I will say this, though, when you look at the roster, no matter what happens here, and I know they could get further attrition to the transfer portal as well. You look at the backcourt, there's basically 3 guys. I know you could argue Jet Howard could play back there in a bind, but he's 6'7". I think of him more as a 3. I think of him as a better potential 4 than a 2. So they're going to have to do something there regardless of what happens. As you mentioned, I think it'd be a 2 guard would be the number one thing on the priority list, because even if Hunter and Musa leave, you still have Terrace Reed, a highly rated guy coming in. You could play smaller with Terrence Williams or even move Caleb Houston to the 4. There's some more things you can do there, but with the backcourt, they were shorthanded 2 years ago when they only had 4 guys, let alone, having to have 3. I think that'd be really tough. So that's something that I think they can get on right away, but they have to wait for some of the other guys to leave or do whatever they're going to do because of the scholarship situation. They're at 13 right now, and you can't go over with some of these super seniors like you could last year. So that is very interesting. And just to correct what I said, April 24th at 11:59 p.m. is when these guys have to decide. So still got a few weeks here until those will all be in, and then after that, you wait and see who can come back until June 1. So it's going to be a long, drawn-out process. Anything else on the basketball front from you guys?
That's it.
I hope
everybody's dying.
Coach
So
K
I'm gonna
loses by 100 on Saturday.
All right, you guys were both talking at the same time. I didn't hear what you said, but I think you guys have nothing left. Either do I. Appreciate everybody watching. $1 gets you an entire year at thewolverine.com. Got some fun stuff coming up planned as Chris's battery died, I believe. So he is out for Saturday, though. Post-game, we will also be there. Potentially, hope to see people there.